If you're so smart, then translate it.
To understand everything is to forgive everything.
The room was filled with laughter. Polite, forced, the kind that made a waitress feel small. He leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping the glass, smirk playing on his lips. "If you're so smart," he said, "then translate it." He thought she'd stutter, that she'd look down and walk away. But she didn't. She took a breath, and what she said next turned every head in the room. Subscribe to Endless Stories and share this video, because sometimes the quietest voice carries the deepest truth. The restaurant was a swanky corner of the city, a place where power played out in murmured conversations and the quiet clink of silverware. The tables were dressed in crisp white linen, the soft glow of candlelight turning every dish into a promise of something special. She moved between them with practiced ease, her black apron tied neat around her waist. Her name tag read Anna, though no one ever bothered to read it. To most, she was just another waitress, a shadow in the warm, golden light. He noticed her, though not because he saw her, but because he liked the way her eyes didn't waver. She didn't shrink when he spoke, didn't flinch at the sharp edge in his laughter. The billionaire CEO. They all knew his name, whispered it like a spell in the quiet corners of the dining room. His watch gleamed under the soft lights, his tailored suit fitting like a second skin. He had the calm certainty of a man who had never heard the word no and believed it was his right to test the world. Anna brought him his drink, her steps smooth, her eyes steady. "Here you are, sir," she said softly, the quiet weight of respect in her tone. He took it without looking at her, swirling the amber liquid in the glass. "I've been talking about the new deal," he said, his voice low and easy, like every word was a performance. "Some of my colleagues don't seem to understand the finer points." His friends laughed, a soft chorus of approval, the kind that said they'd laugh at anything he said. He leaned back, his gaze flicking to Anna. "You speak other languages?" he asked, his tone light. But there was a hook in the question, a sharp glint in the quiet. She met his eyes, her voice calm. "A few," she said. His lips twitched, the smirk of a man who thought he had her cornered. "Good," he said. "Translate this, then." He rattled off a line in French, quick, sharp, like a knife. The words slid off his tongue with the easy arrogance of someone who had learned them not out of love, but as a tool to impress. The table laughed. Even the waiter at the next table paused, glancing over with raised brows. Anna didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She took a slow breath, the quiet calm of someone who had learned that the best answers didn't need to shout. She repeated the line in English, every word clear, every meaning precise. Her voice didn't tremble. She didn't miss a beat. The laughter faded. The CEO's smirk faltered, just for a second. A crack in the polished armor. And in that hush, something shifted. Because he had thrown down a challenge, certain she would fumble. But she hadn't. She had met his arrogance with quiet certainty, and in the silence that followed, she had made him see her. The hush that followed her translation settled over the table like a held breath. For a heartbeat, the air itself seemed to pause, caught in the soft gravity of her voice. Anna stood still, her tray held at her side, her gaze calm and unyielding. She wasn't smug. She didn't smirk. She just waited. The same quiet patience she'd worn through long nights and long shifts, through laughter that had never been hers. The CEO shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm against the polished table. His friends glanced at one another, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. They had expected a show, a stumble, a stammer, something they could brush aside with an easy laugh. But she had given them none of that. Anna's quiet answer had cut through the room, a soft, clear note in the din of forced laughter. One of the friends, a man in an expensive watch and a suit that seemed to weigh him down, cleared his throat. "Impressive," he said, but his voice was thin, the words brittle in the hush. The CEO said nothing at first. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip, his eyes on Anna as if weighing something. The smirk was gone, replaced by a stillness that was almost more dangerous. The quiet edge of a man who didn't like to be surprised. Anna didn't look away. She stood her ground, her breath steady. She had learned a long time ago that sometimes the only power you needed was the strength not to flinch. The moment stretched, taut and silent, until finally the CEO spoke. "Tell me," he said, his voice low, each word deliberate. "What else can you translate?" The question wasn't about words. It was about her, about what he thought she was worth, what she might be hiding behind the quiet confidence in her eyes. Anna let the pause settle between them, her gaze never wavering. "Whatever you need," she said softly. "But only if you're ready to hear the truth." The man's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. The weight of the words, her quiet challenge, settled into the hush like a stone in a still pond. Around them, the diners leaned in, drawn by the hush and the glint of something they couldn't quite name. The CEO sat back, his eyes narrowing, but there was a flicker of something else there, too. Respect, maybe, or at least the quiet understanding that she was not what he had expected. Anna stepped back then, her tray held steady, her breath even. She turned away without another word, the moment hers. The quiet victory of a woman who had met arrogance with calm certainty and walked away taller for it. Anna moved through the restaurant with the same quiet grace, but something had shifted. She could feel it in the soft hush that followed her. The way conversations seemed to pause for just a heartbeat as she passed. The way eyes followed her with something like curiosity, or maybe even respect. She didn't seek it. She didn't need it. But she felt it all the same. The echo of that moment with the CEO still humming in the quiet spaces of the dining room. She slipped behind the bar to drop off an empty tray, her fingers brushing the cool marble as she steadied her breath. The bartender, a lean man with kind eyes, gave her a small smile. "I saw that," he said softly. "The way you shut him down." Anna shook her head, her lips quirking in a faint smile. "I didn't shut him down," she said. "I just answered." "Sometimes," the bartender said. "That's all it takes." She said nothing, but her eyes met his, a quiet understanding passing between them. Because they both knew, in a world where some people thought volume was power, sometimes the quietest voices carried the deepest weight. The CEO watched her from his table, his gaze steady, unreadable. He said nothing, but she felt the weight of his eyes as she moved between the tables, the quiet certainty in her steps unbroken. One of his friends leaned in, his voice a low murmur. "She's not just a waitress," he said. "You see that, right?" The CEO didn't answer. He didn't need to. The faint crease in his brow, the way his fingers drummed once against the table, said enough. He had come here tonight for a meal, for an evening of easy laughter and forced smiles. But he had found something else instead, something he couldn't name but couldn't ignore. Anna didn't let it distract her. She moved with the same calm focus, her eyes bright, her breath steady. She had learned a long time ago that respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you carried in the quiet line of your shoulders, the soft strength of your voice. And tonight she had carried it well. The quiet hush of the restaurant thickened as the evening wore on. The plates were cleared. The hum of conversation rose and fell in gentle waves, and the warm glow of candles cast soft shadows across the white linens. Anna moved between the tables, the soft clink of cutlery and the low murmur of voices her constant companions. But she felt his gaze, the CEO's watchful eyes never far, their weight a quiet challenge she refused to bend beneath. He signaled for her, a single, deliberate motion of his hand. She approached, her breath slow, her tray held with the same practiced ease that had seen her through countless nights. "Another drink?" she asked, her voice calm. He nodded once, but his lips curved in a faint, sharp smile. "Yes," he said. "But first, tell me something." Anna paused, her head tilting slightly. "What would you like to know, sir?" He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the base of his glass. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" he asked. "Most people, they freeze. You didn't." She held his gaze, her voice soft but unflinching. "I learned it from listening," she said. "From not assuming that someone's worth is measured by the way they speak, but by the way they carry themselves." The CEO's smirk didn't fade, but his eyes sharpened, a flicker of something that looked like curiosity beneath the arrogance. "Interesting," he said, his voice low. "So tell me, what do you hear when you listen to me?" The question hung in the air, a quiet dare. The table around them went still, the laughter and chatter of his friends fading into the hush. Anna didn't look away. "I hear a man who's used to the sound of his own voice," she said softly. "But I also hear a man who's not used to hearing the quiet truth of someone else's." The CEO's fingers paused in their tapping, the smile frozen for just a breath. Around them, the hush deepened, a silent ripple of respect, or maybe surprise, moving through the small circle of diners. Anna didn't press the moment. She let the silence speak for her, the calm surety in her eyes enough to meet his challenge. He leaned back, his smirk finally fading, replaced by something else, something almost like respect. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for your honesty." She inclined her head, her tray steady in her hands. "You're welcome, sir." And as she turned away, she felt the quiet strength of that moment settle into her bones. The knowledge that some challenges didn't need to be met with noise or anger. Sometimes the quiet truth was enough. The hush in the restaurant softened, the air returning to its gentle rhythm, the low murmur of conversations, the clink of glasses, the rustle of napkins folded and refolded. But something had changed. Anna moved back behind the bar, the quiet power of the moment still steady in her chest. She could feel it, the ripple that had begun when she had met his challenge without flinching, without raising her voice. The bartender caught her eye, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You handled that well," he said quietly. Anna shrugged, her lips curving just a little. "It's not about handling," she said. "It's about standing." He nodded, his hands busy with the row of gleaming glasses. "That's a rare thing," he said, "especially in this place." She didn't answer, but her smile held, because she knew it was true. Not just here, but everywhere. The world was loud, full of people who thought volume was the same as strength. But she had learned in the quiet spaces that sometimes the strongest thing you could do was stand still. Across the room, the CEO watched her, his fingers drumming a slow, thoughtful rhythm against his glass. The smirk was gone now, replaced by a quiet curiosity that hadn't been there before. His friends watched too, but the laughter had faded, replaced by something closer to respect, or at least a grudging kind of wonder. He leaned forward, his voice low as he spoke to the man beside him. "She didn't flinch," he said, as if he still couldn't quite believe it. The man nodded. "She didn't need to," he said. "That's what rattled you." The CEO didn't argue. He just took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving Anna as she moved between the tables, calm, unhurried, her shoulders straight and her breath steady. Because in the quiet that followed, everyone in that room had seen the same thing. The quiet power of a woman who had learned that dignity wasn't something you asked for. It was something you carried, no matter who was watching. As the evening drew on, the restaurant's soft glow deepened, turning every reflection into a shimmer of gold and shadow. Anna moved between the tables with the same quiet purpose, her steps sure, her breath calm. But she felt the air shift as the CEO lifted his hand once more. She approached his table, her eyes steady. "Yes, sir?" she said, her voice soft but certain. He tilted his head, his eyes glinting with something that looked like a new kind of challenge. "I have a friend visiting from Europe," he said. "He's particular about language. He thinks no one here could keep up." He paused, letting the words settle. "Translate this for me, if you can." He rattled off a line in Italian, quick, fluid, the kind of phrase that danced just out of reach for most. His friends leaned in, the air crackling with the hush of expectation, the quiet tension of another test. Anna didn't flinch. She listened, her breath slow and steady, her eyes meeting his with the calm certainty of someone who didn't need to prove herself, only to stand firm in what she knew. Then she repeated the line back in flawless English, each word as precise and measured as the breath she drew to speak it. The CEO's smirk faltered again, the corners of his mouth tightening in something almost like surprise. Around them, his friends shifted, their quiet laughter stilled by the calm certainty in Anna's voice. "Impressive," the CEO said finally, but there was no humor in his tone now, only a quiet respect that he couldn't quite hide. "Most people would have stumbled." Anna inclined her head, her voice calm. "Most people," she said, "don't know the difference between noise and understanding." The CEO leaned back in his chair, the faintest flicker of a smile tugging at his lips. "And you do?" he asked, his voice low. Anna met his gaze without blinking. "I've had to," she said. "Some of us learn that listening, truly listening, is worth more than anything you could say." The hush that followed was deeper than the one before. Not the hush of shock or scandal, but the quiet weight of respect that settled into every breath. Anna turned away then, her steps measured, the moment hers. And though no one clapped, no one cheered, the silence that followed was louder than any applause. Because in that quiet hush, everyone understood. The woman they thought was just another waitress had shown them the power of a voice that refused to be shaken. The soft glow of the candles flickered, dancing on the polished cutlery and wine glasses. The hush that had followed Anna's second translation didn't fade. Instead, it settled into the small spaces between conversations, weaving through the room like a quiet current. Anna returned to her duties, each step steady, her breath calm. She could feel the difference, the way the air had shifted. No one called out to her like she was invisible anymore. No one waved her off with an impatient flick of the hand. Instead, heads turned as she passed, small nods of respect that said, "We see you now." At the bar, the bartender gave her a small smile. "Twice in one night," he murmured. "You've got them talking." Anna let out a slow breath, her lips curving in a faint smile. "Let them," she said softly. "It's better than being ignored." She didn't say it for effect. She said it because it was true. She had learned long ago that sometimes the only way to be seen was to stand still and let your truth speak louder than any shout. The CEO watched her from his table, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm against the glass. His friends had fallen silent, the easy laughter of earlier replaced by a thoughtful hush. One of them leaned closer, his voice low. "She's not just another waitress," he said. "She's something else." The CEO didn't answer right away. He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving Anna as she moved through the room, the quiet confidence in her steps unshakable. "She's not what I expected," he said finally, his voice low. "But maybe that's what I needed." His friend raised an eyebrow. "You're not used to being the one who's surprised," he said lightly. The CEO didn't smile. "No," he said, "I'm not." And in that soft, thoughtful hush, something shifted. The man who thought he held every advantage, every clever line and sharp edge, was beginning to see that power wasn't always in the words you spoke, but in the calm, quiet way you refused to be moved. Anna didn't need to hear their conversation. She didn't need their approval. She had found something deeper, the quiet power of being seen, and the calm certainty that sometimes the strongest stand was the one you took without raising your voice. The restaurant was alive with quiet motion, the soft clink of cutlery, the low hum of conversation, the gentle glow of candlelight flickering across linen tablecloths. But in the corner where the CEO and his friends sat, there was a different stillness, a hush that held the weight of something unspoken. Anna felt it as she moved, the soft echo of each step a quiet counterpoint to the noise of the world. She paused to refill a glass, her fingers steady, her eyes calm, and in that small moment, she met the CEO's gaze again. For a breath, the noise of the room seemed to fade. She saw him, really saw him. Not the man who liked to test the world with his sharp tongue and easy arrogance, but the man who was learning, slowly, that respect couldn't be demanded. It had to be given. He didn't smirk this time. He didn't lean back in his chair like a man who owned the room. Instead, he nodded once, the smallest of gestures, but enough. Enough to say, "I see you." Anna inclined her head in return, her breath slow, her shoulders steady. She didn't need to speak. The hush between them said everything. The CEO's friends shifted, their laughter quieting, their eyes thoughtful. One of them leaned closer, his voice low. "You've never been one to be silenced," he said quietly. But tonight, it's different. The CEO didn't answer, but his lips curved in a faint, thoughtful smile. She didn't silence me, he said. She just reminded me what it means to be heard. And in that soft hush, the weight of the moment settled around them like a warm cloak. Because respect wasn't loud. It wasn't in the flash of a raised voice or the harsh slap of an insult. It was in the quiet breath of someone who refused to be small, and in the calm recognition of a man who finally understood. Anna turned away then, her steps slow, the moment hers. She didn't need to prove anything. She didn't need to shout. Because in the quiet spaces between words, she had already said everything. The soft light of the restaurant felt different now, as if it had shifted to hold the weight of what had passed. Anna moved between the tables, her breath calm, the quiet echo of the moment still warm in her chest. She could feel the difference in the air, the way people paused to watch her, not with the shallow curiosity of those who wanted a spectacle, but with the quiet respect of those who had seen something that mattered, something that didn't need to be loud to be heard. The bartender caught her eye as she passed. "He's still watching you," he said softly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Anna didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. "Let him," she said, her voice low but sure. "He's learning." She wasn't sure what he was learning, or if it would last beyond the glow of the candles and the hush of the night. But that wasn't hers to worry about. Her stand hadn't been for him. It had been for herself, for the quiet certainty that respect wasn't something you waited for. It was something you carried. Across the room, the CEO sat a little straighter, his drink forgotten in his hand. His friends spoke in low voices, but he didn't join in. He just watched, not with the sharp, testing gaze of a man looking for weakness, but with the calm recognition of someone who had seen strength he hadn't expected. He lifted his glass slowly, his eyes meeting hers across the room. And then, without a word, he raised it in a small, silent salute. Anna inclined her head, the smallest of nods, and turned away. She didn't need the gesture, but she understood what it meant, the quiet echo of a respect earned, not given. She paused at the edge of the dining room, the soft hush of the place settling around her. And in that breathless quiet, she felt the truth of it settle into her bones. Because some victories didn't need to be shouted. Some stands didn't need to be loud. And in the calm certainty of her steps, she carried all the noise she would ever need. The night wore on, the warm light of the restaurant wrapping every table in a gentle hush. Anna finished her shift with the same calm grace she had carried all night, her steps sure, her breath steady. As she gathered the last empty glasses, she caught the bartender's eye. He gave her a small nod, his smile quiet but warm. "You did more than serve tonight," he said softly. Anna just smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need words. "Sometimes," she said, "that's what matters most." She turned to leave the floor, the soft hush of the restaurant settling behind her like a memory. The CEO watched her as she moved, not with the arrogance of a man who thought he owned the room, but with the quiet respect of someone who had been forced to see what he'd missed. He didn't call out to her. He didn't try to pull her back for one last test, one last moment of control. He just watched, his fingers wrapped loosely around his glass, the faintest glimmer of a smile touching his lips. Anna didn't look back. She didn't need to. The quiet weight of the night settled into her bones, the knowledge that some debts were never paid in applause or noise, but in the soft breath of respect that lingered long after the last word had been spoken. As she stepped out into the cool night air, the hush of the restaurant echoing behind her, she felt the quiet victory of what she had carried. Not just the translations she had spoken, but the stand she had taken. She had reminded them all, and maybe herself most of all, that some voices didn't need to be loud to be heard. Because in the quiet echo of her steady breath, in the calm surety of her steps, she had found the only recognition that ever really mattered. And as she walked down the street, the city lights painting soft shadows on the pavement, she knew that respect wasn't something you waited for. It was something you owned. Thank you for joining this story. If it moved you, if it reminded you that quiet strength can echo louder than any shout, please subscribe to Endless Stories and share this video. Because some debts aren't paid in applause. They're paid in the quiet breath of a promise kept.